Hello, everybody. How are you today? Thank you for joining us for Library 21. Yes, we're still remote, but that does not take away from how excited we are with you today. We're sorry for the little bit of a delay. It would not be 2020 or 2021 with the technical issues, but so there we've got it. But we are ready to have a really wonderful program with you today. Um, we hope you're all doing really well, safe, healthy. Um, we're really excited to start our program. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping things with you. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Kelly Coyle Crivelli from Penguin Random House Library Marketing, and this program that we're doing is something that we've done at ALA Annual every year for the past, I think, 5 or 6 years. So we didn't want to miss a summer without being able to meet with all the librarians and talk about graphic novels and talk to some of our creators. So we're really happy. And I would like for my colleague to introduce herself really quickly, Miriam.
Yes, hi everyone. Miriam calling in, and it's great to see you all here today.
All right, so we just want to let you know that if you want to see all of the things that we have going on today, there's a tiny URL on the screen that you could go to, and you could look at our entire program for the day. And also let you know that all of these things that we're going to be talking about today will all be sent out in a wrap up to everybody that registered. So you'll have all the archives, you'll be able to view it all again. So don't feel like you need to write anything down or scribble any notes, because you'll be able to watch it again, and all of the links will be clickable, and you'll be able to visit our YouTube channel and go back and forth to see these programs again. So before I think we are ready to get right into our program, which is such an exciting part, which is the most exciting part of our day. And I want to introduce to you first Scott Snyder, and he's going to be in conversation with Sue Yang Peace, who is the Youth Services Department Head at the Las Vegas County Library District. Scott's going to be talking about his book today, American Vampire 1976. Scott has been published in Zoetrope, One Story, Tin House, Epic, and other journals. He teaches at Columbia University and lives in New York City. And I just want to say, as a true fangirl of Scott's, Scott and I have done a couple of programs together in Bryant Park and at other conventions. And Scott, it's funny because every time you talk about your books or graphic novels or superheroes, I always end up crying. So I'm wondering if I'll start crying today. So it's just always so lovely to have you, and we welcome you, and we hope that you and Sue will have a wonderful conversation together.
No, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you, Sue, and everybody there. I mean, I back when I was starting out, and we lived in like a tiny, condo. I would go to every library I could find to write all the time, and the one out here by us, we just, we moved about 2 hours out of the city. Was like my whole base of operations for the big majority of my comic book writing career. So.
Wow. That's wonderful. We are huge library fans ourselves, and we're happy. After this is over, Miriam and I are actually going to hit the New York Public Library shop because it's finally open, and we're going to spend a lot of money.
Nice.
So you two have a great conversation. Miriam and I are going to disappear for a little bit, and we'll be back.
Hi, good morning, Scott. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you, Sue. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited. So you did talk about libraries. I have a few questions, but since you already mentioned libraries, I was just wondering a little bit briefly about your writing process, and that you mentioned you were in libraries and you wrote sometimes. If you could briefly explain that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, I have, we have 3 boys. So, with a big spread. One is 14, one is 10, and one is 2, who is a bit of a surprise and is a great joy. And when I do the math and I realize he's going to graduate high school in like 2037, it always floors me. And I'm like, I better go to that graduation in some kind of flying car. But yeah, so we've had a full house. I mean, I've all I've ever wanted to do always was be a writer, predominantly a comic book writer. I found my way in through literary fiction. I wanted to go to college for to learn how to be a graphic novelist. So I picked a school I went to school in Providence at Brown because RISD was right there, and I was excited to do both. But I wasn't really good enough as an artist, and I wound up sort of seeing how amazing so many illustrative artists were at that time that I gave up on that aspect of it and wound up falling in love with literary fiction. It was this great moment in the 90s when there was just this explosion of the short story, I think, in particular. And so libraries became a huge part of both my writing process and also just my input. I went and I remember when I first got to grad school, first when I was in college and then in grad school, my big sort of golden ring was finding shelves in the library that had the best American short stories dating all the way back to the beginning of that run. And first in Providence and then in Columbia, I found these incredible whole kind of anthologies of best American short stories going all the way back to, you know, the days when John Updike and people were in them all the way, and the O. Henry stories. So my process really has always been to when it comes to actually to writing a comic or a short story or anything really is to figure out what it means to me first. I have friends that have an inverted process from this where if they know what the thing is about when they start, they can't write it because it's boring to them. So there's no right way to do it, obviously, but my way is to kind of something will catch my eye or an image or a thought or a premise, and I have to really unpack it for myself to understand what it is that I'm exploring to start to use the craft tools the right way for me. I need that confidence of knowing, like with American Vampire, well, this is going to be a series. I'll have an idea. Like American Vampire really started with I was buying a gift for a friend of mine in a like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of shop where it was all like gaming stuff, and I saw a zombie Civil War chess set, and it was all zombies. And I remember just thinking, like, so odd to me that there aren't more indigenous or American versions of some of these classic monsters. Or well, what would it be if there was a species of vampire, for example, that was born here and had different powers? And it came to me, and so then I'll take it apart and say, what really takes me about that? And it's about American Vampire in particular was always about, well, I love it because it would mean that there's a way of examining our own history, especially the late 19th and full 20th century, through a kind of lens of of monstrosity, where you could see the ways in which we're both we acted our most heroic and our most horrifying. And to create a series that would explore that by means of this vampire genealogy, where all these different species from around the world would become aware of the American vampire and what it was, and it itself would change and evolve. And that really got exciting to me because I knew what I wanted to do was a big, robust kind of soap opera that would be this prismatic kind of take on both vampire biology, but also on American history. So that's kind of what I need to do is I need to unpack it, know what it's about, and then I start to be like, well, who's the best character to start from in that case? What gives me the in? What gives me the way of exploring this topic the most thoroughly from go? So it's almost like knowing where you're trying to go and then picking all of the routes along picking the road map, you know, or deciding along the map like which roads are going to be the best ones to take you there, let you see the things you want to see along the way the most, all of that.
That's actually perfect. That's exactly what I was wondering was if you go about your normal day, you see your sons, you know, you go to the grocery store or something and something sparks the, like you said, the Dungeons and Dragons store, and it unravels this, you know, stream of ideas and thoughts. And that was like exactly what I was wondering was if it just sparks something in you and you kind of go from there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, for me, again, like a lot of it is, again, I have friends that like, if they know the end destination, they don't want to write the story. So none of this is prescriptive necessarily for anybody out there who's an aspiring writer. But for me, that it's the skeleton key to my whole process is kind of knowing where I'm headed because I understand what I'm writing about. So it might change along the way. Sometimes, like, you know, American Vampire was one of those series that took a lot of detours because I fell in love with different characters and wanted to explore certain eras even more deeply and more uh, with more lunacy than I thought I might. But you know, its destination and where it was going to end is in the initial document. So even from over 10 years ago, it was going to end in 1976 with this series, this arc, and then we'd get to bring it up to the present for any subsequent series or any subsequent spin-offs that we do down the line.
Um, Speaking of American Vampire 1976, since we just mentioned, it's coming out as a collected edition on November 2nd. What was it like revisiting a character like Skinner Sweetie?
Oh man, it's so wonderful, honestly. I mean, Pearl too. The funny thing about those characters, it's such a good question because there's a few ways into the answer to this one, but um those characters in this series is really, they're like home to me. I mean, out of everything I've ever written, I don't like to pick favorites, but American Vampire is the most me. It's the one that if I had to pick one and say it embodies all of my interests, all of my passions, all the things I love to do with writing. It's the biggest kind of home base for that for me, where it's horror, it's history, it's character driven, it's big and crazy and dramatic and soapy. You know, it has literary aspects, all of it kind of in one big mashup. But I think revisiting them now was particularly poignant for me for a couple of reasons. One is that, you know, I love them and I miss them. And Raphael and I have always planned on coming back to the series and doing this arc, which, you know, again, we had talked about when we first started the series. But it was a strange time to come back to it a couple years ago. When we thought about it, it really came down to deciding that it was a perfect arc to do because of the contextual moment, the historical moment, and where we were in our lives on a personal level. So, you know, Pearl and Skinner to me, the secret of the whole series and what you learn in the final issue through Skinner's narration, not to spoil anything, but is that they represent the kind of double helix of the American character to me. You know, Pearl is the American who embraces our highest ideals and believes that she wants to go to Hollywood not to be a star at all, but to be part of something greater than herself, a movie that's inspiring to people out there in the world to be better. She sees the film industry at first, or these great, you know, spectacles of cinema, not as like distractions, but she wants to be a part of something that moves people to be to evolve and to push the country forward in some way. And she sees that mission as a guiding light that goes all the way back to kind of who she was as a girl in the Black Sunflower Fields to being in this arc this big leader of this whole organization of monsters, you know, and always never caring if she's remembered for what she does, only caring that she makes an impact and bites the country on the neck, as Skinner says, and leaves a mark. Skinner, on the other hand, is all about what he can get. He's about that individualism and blocking history out, not caring about history, not caring about the future, not caring about anything but yourself and what you can get and how big you can be. And so that those sort of twin flags, they're like almost like two American flags that are like, you know, at opposite ends of the country, and the push and pull between them is sort of the fun of the series. And especially when we were working on this arc, you know, before the election, but in this real culmination of absolute uh you know divisiveness and seeing the country at its worst in so many ways and at its best in other ways, and seeing people go out there and really try to kind of reclaim what we're about in the midst of things that were really frightening, you know, all around and still are, felt like a great moment to bring back the series and to do this arc, because the 70s, the reason I always wanted to do it in 76, even when we started it, you know, 10 years ago, before we knew we'd be in a moment like this now, was because it's the bicentennial, it's the 200th birthday of the country, and it's a moment when we re-examine who we are. So we always thought that would be a great ending, would be to end it in the 70s and then do a coda that brought us up to the present. But looking at it now, you know, the 70s are also a tremendous reflection of this moment. It was a moment of anxiety, of huge political skepticism after, you know, Nixon's impeachment. There was a lot of fears about who we had become. There was anger. There was idealism. All of it kind of in one place at a moment of huge economic, political, and cultural instability. After, you know, all of this hope of the 60s, the crash of that, everything, there's a lot of parallels. So it just felt like a great moment to do this one and remind people why these characters are so kind of in the bloodstream, you know, no pun intended, of the American character. And on a personal level, it was a time to, I really, this year for me, you know, I wanted these years, I finally built a writing studio behind me. Um, Not always working in libraries all the time, but the idea was I wanted to try and do more series like American Vampire, try and take a break from superheroes for a little bit, still, you know, keep a footprint at DC, but work on more series. And so the fun was, well, I want to close this one down on a personal level and give it everything I have. And Rafa felt the same way, so that we could land the plane and then, you know, go on to other journeys in that way, and then always revisit it, you know, revisit the world of American Vampire in ways down the line if we so choose. But everything felt right. So that's why it's a joy and a pleasure and an honor coming back to these characters. I love them more than anything, and to do it with the original team, that's a rare thing. You know, Steve the letterer, Dave McKeag the colorist, Raphael, you know, my blood brother on the book, the artist, and you know, we've been on the book from the very beginning together as one team, and that's never wavered for 10 years. And our editor, Mark Doyle, still reads the scripts even though he's no longer at DC, and the editor that took over for him, Maggie Howell, came up under him and has been amazing. So anyway, they're family, and I love them, and it was a joy to do this arc in particular right now.
That's wonderful. There's one last question I have, which are, what are some titles you're excited about this fall as a fan?
Oh man, yeah.
Anything in particular?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, I'm excited about a couple things like from friends, like Jeff Lemire has some great books coming out. I was so excited to see the success of Sweet Tooth. He has the Maze book, and I've read a couple of his things. James Tynan at DC, he has Nice House on the Lake. His new creator-owned series at Black Label is just a behemoth. It's such a great apocalyptic, character-driven, almost paranoid, claustrophobic story. Everyone should pick that up. I'm sure that the trade is probably coming out around the same time as American Vampire, if not maybe a little later. But also the other history of the DC universe, that is a book that I've been enjoying tremendously, and I decided I wanted to wait to read the bulk of it until it came out in trade, because it's such a comprehensive read. John Ridley is doing amazing things with so many artists on there, and it's an urgent and important book right now. And one other one that I'm really looking forward to is the Batman the World, like the idea that all these creators from around the world, different countries, are doing interpretations of Batman. I mean, I love when I'm always up for a new take on Batman, or Batman placed in a situation that really challenges our expectations about the character. The worst thing you can do with Batman, I think, is play it safe or make him boring or repeat anything, because he's so adaptable, as Grant Morrison often says. So the idea that we're going to get these incredible interpretations all around the world in ways that hopefully are also really eye-opening and challenging and inspiring is a real thrill. And I'm always there for Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo too as an anchor story. They're both friends, and I love what they do together. So that should be really fun. So those are a few.
Thank you so much. I think, are we okay on time? Scott, thank you so much.
yeah.
I'm like floored right now, to be honest, fanning of it. So I'm gonna.
Yes, thank you both so much. I always love the graphic novel panels, and I just think that the reason why they work so well, maybe this is just one of the theories too, is that so many people work on one graphic novel, one book comes together by so many people that you already get so many insights from everybody's perspective in one book, that I think that's why they're just so loved by the masses. And I think that's why they're just there's just such a wonderful genre for that reason. And I do feel like, Scott, when you do something, you have so many levels on which you're thinking about it, and that comes through, and it's inspiring. And you know, how many times this year did we all wish a superhero would show up and get us out of this mess?
Yeah. Well, one of the fun things about, just like you said, Kelly, I think the reason that I moved over from literary fiction, I always wanted to do comics, but the reason that I thought that I would do comics and then literary fiction would remain my kind of fallback, like I have such career stability there, but you know what I mean, like I'd have like some back and forth, but the reason I kind of never looked back really when I started doing comics was the collaborative aspect. That's exactly what you said, where you have an idea and then there's this collectivism with comics. There's this sense of everybody bringing it to life by believing in it together and bringing their own passion and elevating it beyond what you could do alone through all of their talents. And that feeling of making something as a team or a family is so special, and I think it speaks to a lot of what this is about, LibraryCon, the idea of people coming together to celebrate books, to band together to make sure people remember what's important in difficult times and find things that inspire them and ignite their passion to make a difference in different ways as well. So yeah, it's the best thing about comics is the collaborative and aspect where you have to let other people in. You have to give your baby to somebody else and see how they raise it in a different way. So it's really wonderful.
Yeah, and it seems to me to be such the antithesis. I can't talk today. I'm so nervous about the technology that I forget. But it seems to me it's such the opposite of the way things are going now, where everybody's kind of it's just the opposite. You have to collaborate, you have to have teamwork, you have to take yourself out of it a little bit. And it's just the opposite of all the rest of what's out there, of everyone just kind of having their one opinion and their one thing. So I don't know. I always feel like LibraryCon is the most collaborative effort of the year. And this is why we're so happy that you're with us today, talking about this wonderful project that you're doing. And we're glad that you were, and I also, we had the privilege of talking to Stan Sakai the other day, and we were talking about the creative process and how during this past year, a lot of creative types and a lot of illustrators or writers or whatever, maybe that saved them a little bit, was being able to have this outlet. And so librarians appreciate that you guys kept going and working through all this. And we hope you realize how appreciated it is that you kept creating.
Absolutely.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat about whether or not you're back out there doing signings, and just some wonderful messages here that just say how much people love your work, and we are just so happy. There was one question that I wanted you to answer. Let me see if I can find it again. Let's see. Let's see, where was it? It was in the chat. Okay, so do you have any interest in ever compliments?
Oh, you broke up for a split second after you said, do you have any interest in
tackling the Legion of Superheroes?
Oh, yeah, I love the Legion. I think that what Brian Bendis has been doing is really exciting. So it's not like the highest on my list. I think right now, if I could do one superhero book at DC, I'd probably do the JSA, the Justice Society of America. And I had this whole pitch that I wanted to do, but then I just didn't have time before I kind of moved over to do more of my own stuff. But I'd love to do something about their origins and remind people, they seem kind of encased behind glass as these heroes of World War II in a way that's really sort of idealized. But at that moment in time, I think I'd love to revisit how difficult it was to make the decision to fight the way they had to fight, and how uncertain the future was, and all of it, and do something that really shows them young and assembled as a team, and why they were brought together, who brought them together, all that kind of stuff that shows how wild that moment was, and how uncertain the future was. Bring it back to life in a really different way. So that's one I'd love to do. But Legion is great too.
Great. Well, Scott, thank you so much for being here today. And Sue, thank you very much for being here today. Sue's in the middle of this heat wave out there, and so we hope you're staying cool. But we appreciate both of your time today. We apologize for the delay in the beginning, and we're so excited to have your books come out, Scott, and we're excited to see what you do next, as always.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a joy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank
and we
you.
can't wait to see everybody again.
Thank you.
Keep talking about these
care.
books, no matter where we have to talk about them, we will talk about them. Have a great day. And
Great.
Miriam, if you want to
All right,
introduce our
take
next panel. Bye, Scott. Thank you. Bye, Sue.
Yes, next we have E. Lockhart in conversation with New York Public Library's superstar teen librarian, Michelle Lee. E. Lockhart is the author of the New York Times bestsellers Genuine Fraud, We Were Liars, and several acclaimed novels, including Again, Again, and The Disreputable History of Franklin Landau Banks. E. is a Prince honoree, a National Book Award finalist, and Los Angeles Times Book Prize finalist. A longtime comics fan, E is here to discuss her first graphic novel, Whistle, which is published by DC Comics and will be coming out in September. Welcome, E and Michelle.
And
Thank you. I'm so happy to
Michelle.
be here.
Sorry, I'm just looking for Michelle. We'll be right back. Sorry. Oh, what a day. We're having such a technology day here. We will find.
That's okay. Do you want me to? Should I chat while
Please,
you take
that would
care
be
of
wonderful.
things?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Can we change the slide so they can see the book
yes,
check?
of course. There we go.
All right. So this, I am so excited to be at LibraryCon specifically with this project because it originated at LibraryCon. I was there a number of years ago. I think I was signing my novel Genuine Fraud, and an editor from DC Comics came up to me, and I had just done this amazing, wonderful, also super embarrassing project panel where it was like trivia contest thing, and it was me and Julie Berry, and I can't remember who the other writer was, and there was a man in Obi-Wan Kenobi robes, and he was like doing all this young adult and comic book trivia, and there was a big screen, and there were like 500 awesome youth librarians there, and I was supposed to answer trivia questions, and I was so out of my depth, and they wisely gave us the option to like ask a librarian. So we were able to get like a single librarian who was like our coach, and my librarian was, I wish I remembered her name because she won this thing for us. She knew every answer. I knew no answers. I was feeling quite abashed and also victorious because we won. And then I was signing. So it was, just a lot of like, oh gosh, did I just make a giant fool of myself in public? I think I did. And this editor came up from DC and said that they had read some of my books, and did I want to talk to them about writing in that DC space. And so LibraryCon brought me into the comic book world, and I'm so psyched to be back. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
I was just
Story.
freestyling while you figured your tech out.
No worries.
So I'm glad that you two are connected. And like I said before, Miriam and I will disappear while you two chat, and we'll be back on later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And E, I will say I was at that event and I remember, and you did a great job.
Thank you.
So can you talk a little bit about your graphic novel, your Whistle, and just a little bit about the inspiration for the writing?
Yeah, sure. It's called Whistle, A New Gotham City Hero. And basically, Whistle is a teenage activist Jewish high school student in an area of Gotham City. Now, I can't imagine any of you 1,000 librarians don't know that Gotham City is where Batman lives, but just in case, Gotham City is where Batman lives. And in Gotham City, there are a lot of nefarious villains, such as the Riddler and Poison Ivy and Killer Croc and lots of other, a wonderful rogues gallery, but those three are important for now. So this young woman is fighting to bring City Hall funds and attention to the problems of a very specific neighborhood of Gotham City. It's called Downriver. I made it up. It's kind of like the Lower East Side of New York City used to be back in the 80s when it was very run down. It's a formerly Jewish neighborhood. And there used to be 500 synagogues in this small space of the Lower East Side because so many immigrant families were coming from different parts of mostly, but not entirely, Eastern Europe and settling in the Lower East Side, and they would each create a synagogue for their particular town and community. Anyway, later on, the neighborhood becomes much more mixed. All different types of people are living there. And in the story of Whistle, the neighborhood of Downriver has become pretty run down and neglected by the, Gotham City Hall. And so she is trying to get funding for education. She's trying to get funding to help restore the community centers, which have been attacked by a mysterious plant-based villain who is greening all of these, the mosque, the church, the community center, the library. They're being covered with plants and thereby destroyed. People can't go into them. People can't use them. The neighborhood is losing value. So, long story short, she gets superpowers. The superpowers link her to a dog who is a Great Dane who is named Leibowitz. Leibowitz is named after Fran Lebowitz, one of my favorite humorists. And Leibowitz is the first ever female dog superhero. And Willow becomes Whistle. So they become Whistle and the Hound. And she has these superpowers which relate to the dog. They can talk to each other, and she can command an army of dogs with her whistle. So those are her powers. And she goes up against Poison Ivy, who you might figure out is behind this greening activity. Also the Riddler and Killer Croc during the course of her adventures.
That is a great summarization of the great book.
I told you all the things.
So how was the experience writing your first graphic novel?
It was really, really fun. I worked with a wonderful young editor at DC called Diego Lopez, and with the artist Manuel Pretano, who is Italian. He did another recent book for graphic novel for DC called Oracle Code, and he has a real sense of emotion. Like, he really, really brings out how characters are feeling in such a wonderful way. So the story doesn't feel like, too much super heroics. It feels very relatable and very, very real, I think. So it was, like Scott was saying, a very collaborative experience. I've written a lot of picture books where you don't communicate with the artist a lot. And in this case, we were in communication almost every day. I got to see sketches. I got to kibitz on the costume design. I sent over all these Pinterest images. If you are on Pinterest, and librarians, I know a lot of you do love Pinterest, you can visit me up there and see inspiration images that Manuel used for his art for all of the major characters, and also the landscape. So we just had a good old fun time sharing art and and having a dialogue about what this world of downriver Gotham City was going to look like, and who these people were. It was really, really, really fun.
That's great. And it was kind of fascinating just to kind of see all these real life problems that you brought up in this book, because even though it's a superhero book, a lot of things that Willow and her family faces are true life things. Income inequality, financial troubles,
Lack of health insurance.
lack of health insurance. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about why you decided to kind of incorporate these themes into your superhero debut.
Well, I have a lot of love for a lot of superheroes for various reasons, but I grew up, when I was young, my favorite superhero was Spider-Man. And the thing that I loved so much about Spider-Man was that he was a kid like me, right? A city kid with family troubles and girl troubles and, you know, mean kids at school picking on him. And I loved the empowerment of the transformation into the superhero, that origin story. And I also am really interested in superhero characters for whom the superheroics are complicated or messy or, you know, so I'm way more interested in the Hulk than I am in Captain America. And I'm interested in the Hulk because his heroism is linked to his terrible temper, of which he is ashamed, and his superhero body is not really all the way under his control, and that's upsetting and bizarre. And you know, Wilson's Ms. Marvel has that same thing, right? The body is suddenly empowered, but also out of control and foreign to the new superhero. And so I was interested in finding that conflict between, you know, just the ordinary teenage girl, kid of a single mother is sick with cancer, they've lost their health insurance, her mother can't work anymore. You know, so, you know, that's just, I mean, that's a heightened version of my, you know, I grew up with a single mom and she was not sick, but, you know, what does that family of two people look like, right? When you're a unit of two and that's your whole thing and there's no other support system that's nearby. So I was looking, yeah, for a relatable hero whose problems are not all solved by becoming a hero. You know what I mean? Whose heroism is messy. And I think young people are interested in that, you know, and I think that comics are going in that direction more and more, and I'm seeing more and more stories that have that acknowledge that complexity of heroism. That you know, vigilantism is not the answer to our problems, right? But the story of the heroic vigilante is a powerful fantasy and also you know, worth unpacking.
And I also like how you also kind of brought that along with the villains as well, where, you know, I guess in a normal like Batman scenario, you just see them and they just be kind of like creeping in and doing their evil things and going away. But you kind of,
oh yeah, no, they're really fun. They're charming. You want to have dinner with them. They have really
and
good
also,
parties.
in this case, they're also kind of, they're introduced, but they're not introduced initially as villains either, which I really liked in this book.
Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I was interested in, you know, I think maybe for the longevity of the hero, right? I mean, when you invent a superhero, you're always going to assume that, you know, maybe you will write sequels, but also other people may take this character and do things with it in monthly comics, or in other kinds of graphic fiction further down the line. So I wanted her to have, you know, kind of a big hot mess of allegiances and relationships. And so one big thing about her is that she kind of works as a double agent. She's working underground for the Riddler, running this kind of sexy, fun poker night for him and his cronies, some of whom are supervillains and some of whom are just corrupt Gotham City officials of one type or another. And so, you know, when you work undercover, you have you have relationships with the people that you are deceiving, you know, and so she's really enmeshed in this criminal underworld, and a lot of those people are really nice to her and like her, and so she has always conflicted loyalties. And I thought that would make for like an interesting ongoing set of the push-pull within the character and within the story world.
That was definitely one thing I really appreciated in the book. Can you talk a little bit also about, I guess, the actual experience of writing the graphic novel as opposed to like your normal work with novel writing, like how it's similar and how it's different?
Well, I love to write dialogue, and so I was very eager to kind of try this new form. And when I'm writing long form YA fiction, I'm often writing scenes that are mostly dialogue. And then I layer in later drafts, more description and people moving around in space. But I start by imagining how people are talking, what the rhythms of their speech are, the way the conversation moves, as these two or three people push and pull a conflict or want something from one another. I had to learn how to write a graphic novel script, and one thing that DC did that was really delightful is provide kind of a formal education in graphic novel writing generally, but also specifically in DC Comics style and the style that these YA books were going to be using. And that included one kind of general lecture that was recorded, and also a lecture from Jean Lewin Yang, who is one of my most admired writers generally, but graphic novelists, that's obviously what he does. And I used to teach with Jean at Hamline University's MFA program. So I know him, and this was like an hour and a half like masterclass that Jean had recorded, and I was like, it was a joy. Then I just winged it, you know what I mean? I just learned on the job and read a lot of graphic novels and tried to understand what people were doing that was effective and interesting, and how to leave that room for pictures. And that's such a big part of writing a graphic novel, is that the pictures can do so much of the narrative work. So the words can really pull back, or they can contrast, right? If your character is lying, you can have them say one thing and show that something else is happening. There's all kinds of frisson that you can play around with. So that was, really, really fun.
The other thing that I thought was great about the book is you managed to include wonderful nods to Willow's Jewish heritage and culture. And can you talk a little bit about, the importance that was for you to include that in the book?
Yeah. Yeah, she is. Whistle is the first. I want to make sure I say this absolutely correct, because the archivist at DC will be sad if I don't get it right. She's the first DC hero to launch as Jewish, in other words, not to be retrofitted or reinvented as Jewish, since 1977. Harley Quinn is Jewish. Harley Quinn is not a hero, although a hero to some, perhaps. So this was meaningful to me. There's a really long and interesting history of Jewish comics creators. There's also a lot of really interesting analysis of major superheroes through a lens of Jewish identity, Superman in particular, right? If you start reading about this, you can really read about it for a very long time. It's fascinating. My father is Jewish. My spouse is Jewish. I was raised celebrating Jewish and Christian holidays. I was never Christian, however. My mother is in a New Age religion. So I had an unusual religious upbringing, just in that split identity. which is obviously, you know, one of the reasons I'm so interested in superheroes, and split identities go through all of my books. But I was in Whistle, I was trying to write, you know, sort of within my lane and my own identity as a Jewish person, that the history of Jewish people coming into New York, the cultural traditions, the values, all of those were things that I was brought up with, that sense of myself as part of this group of people and of this history of people. But not, you know, it's not a religious story, because I'm not a religious Jewish person. So it's an intellectual heritage. It's heritage. And so I was writing from that position, and I really just thought that there was still room to explore kind of overtly that whole Jewish identity in relationship to comic book heroism and superpowers. So this was a chance for me to get to play in that sandbox.
It was well incorporated too. So what do you hope are the big takeaways for, I guess, for teens and for librarians from this book?
I so rarely think in terms of takeaways. I think it's an empowering book. I think it's a book that a lot of kids will see themselves in, you know, male identified and female identified kiddos who feel like they want to make a difference and don't know how, right? Whistle's journey is from wanting urgently to make changes and feeling powerless, and it's a journey to power and to self-knowledge. I also think it's just a kick in the pants, right? Superhero origin story, makeover, action, right? It's a romp as well. So hopefully it's just fun on that level.
I think it's going to be like your other books, E, where they just find the right readers, and there's a lot of them, and they span all ages and all readers. And I think it's going to be a great intro to graphic novels for a lot of your fans, which makes me so happy, which I think is going to make a lot of graphic novelists happy. And one question is, I think you've answered it, and I know that it's definitely like YA appropriate, but how some of the librarians in the Q&A are asking like the age range that you think it's appropriate for, which is always
it's super clean. It's super clean, and you know, it's not like We Were Liars where people are dying and drug overdosing and things. So yeah, I would give it to a 10-year-old. There's a little kissing, right? There's some punching. The dog doesn't bleed or anything. DC was very careful about no dog blood is spilled. Dogs are heroic and do things, but they don't get bloody. Yeah, I would definitely, I think it's good 10 and up.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for answering that. And let me just take a look in here and see if there's any other questions that we want to ask you. But yeah, it must be such an amazing process to go from the novel form to the graphic novel form. And you've done it so well, as you do everything well. And having you here today has been so fun. And does any, Miriam, what literacy level is it, is a question that comes in.
Oh, you know, DC hasn't done a found to something
yeah,
on it.
But if it's appropriate for 10-year-olds, I'm sure the reading level is probably right around the same, maybe a little up.
Yeah, I mean, you would know better than I would on that.
We'll let you go.
I'm going out on the road doing you know, school visits and things like that in the fall, and I'm also going to go to a couple Comic-Cons, New York and Detroit. So I'm really I'm psyched to get out of my house and show amazing slides of the history of Jewish superhero characters and creators and all of that. So you know, I don't really know where I was going with that, but I'm
we're excited. We're so excited the book's coming out. We're so excited that you'll be back out there. And we thank you so much for joining us today. This was really just an honor, honestly. And we're so happy that you're in the graphic novel world, which means that now we can invite you to all of the LibraryCon stuff. And I'm sure a lot of the librarians on this session today are thinking the same thing. Now they can invite you to everything.
And Michelle, thank you for the wonderful questions. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you.
I'm going to do my little back end magic here. So just give me 1 second. Oh, sorry. So much easier to just be in person. But thank you, E, again, and take care. And Michelle, thank you so much. Okay, Miriam, you might have to sing or something for a minute while we get. I'm just kidding. We're going to bring up our next panel, which is going to be Joe Hill. Let me just find him amongst the crowd here. And just a reminder, let me just move over here. Just a reminder that we have, if you visit our blog after the session at penguinrandomhouselibrary.com, you will find all of this information. You'll find pre-recorded panels that we did today. And let me just find him, sorry. I don't know why everything is, they're testing me. Hold on a minute. Okay, here we go. Joe, I'm coming. Here we go. And Isaiah is easier because there's going to only be one Isaiah. There was a couple of Joes. Hold on. Okay. There you are. Hello. All right. I'm sorry. I'm coming. There's a lot of people here today, so it's taking me a minute to get through all these. There you are, Isaiah. Sorry. Okay. All right, so our last session today is a conversation between Joe Hill and Isiah Pittman. Isiah Pittman is the adult librarian at the Inwood, the Inwood branch of the New York Public Library, and he's on the Best Books Committee. We are happy that you are here with us today, Isiah, to interview Joe Hill. Joe Hill is the New York Times, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Fireman and Heart-Shaped Box. His second novel, Horns, was made into a feature film starring a little-known Daniel Radcliffe, and he earned the Eisner Award for Best Writer for his comic book series, Lock and Key. We're so happy to have both of you here today to talk to us. Thank you.
It's so great to be here, Isiah. Hello. Hi, Kelly.
Hi. All right, so Miriam and I will do our disappearing act again, and you guys have a great conversation, and we'll be back soon.
Sounds good. Isiah, are you possibly on mute? I see your mouth mute moving, I'm not hearing anything.
Yes, I can't hear you either, Isiah. Hold on.
While he sorts out his sound, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I've been listening through the afternoon of panels, and I heard Scott Snyder talking about what libraries meant to him earlier on and working in libraries. It seems to me that I did write some of either Nosferatu or The Fireman in the Boston Public Library. And I find myself writing about libraries quite a bit. I had a heroic librarian in Nosferatu named Maggie Lee, who I think about all the time. And I did a story in the last book, the last collection, Full Throttle, about bookmobiles and how much they've meant to so many people.
Yes, I loved the character of Maggie so much. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Loud and clear.
You're good.
Wonderful. Yes, I just can't resist just saying that Maggie is great, and I really loved the story also, Late Returns, right? In Full Throttle.
Late Returns. Yeah. Late Returns is a story, this is off topic, but Late Returns is the story of a guy who loses his parents and his job as a truck driver pretty much in one fell swoop. and comes back to his moderately small town. It's not that small, but a moderately small town to pick up the pieces and clean up, what's left over from his parents' lives, to sort of sell the house and everything. And he needs some kind of working gig and picks up a job with his town's bookmobile, which delivers books to outlying districts, and soon discovers that sometimes ghosts turn up at the bookmobile, people who were passionate readers from an earlier era who've come back for one more good read. And that this is known, that people in the library know, in fact, that driving the bookmobile means occasionally meeting the ghost that they call late returns. So probably my favorite story in the book is in the last collection.
Well, it is a tremendous story, although I have to say that my favorite story was probably Fawn, but
Oh, hey, thank you. Well, I like to say that one is Fawn for the whole family. Oh God, should I leave now? I'm so sorry.
No, please don't. Let's switch it up a little bit. We're going to be talking about Lock and Key, which has been renewed for a second season. But let's dive right into talking about the comic book. The first thing I'd really like to know is, what was your experience like working on Lock and Key: The Golden Age?
So The Golden Age is the next book in the series, and is the first one that doesn't tell. So the original 6 books of Lock and Key tell a single overarching story set in mostly in the modern day. And it's about a family after a tragedy coming to the family manse, the old estate that they inherited, Key House, in Lovecraft, Massachusetts. And they aren't there for long before they discover the house is full of impossible keys, reality-bending keys. Every key unlocks a different door and activates a different supernatural power. So there's a key that will allow your ghost to walk free of your body. There is a key that operates a music box that can enslave minds when it begins to play. There is a key, the Anywhere key. You can put it into a door and think about where you want to go and open the door and step out thousands of miles away. So it's sort of like teleportation. And there's one key, of course, that opens a door that should never be opened. Of course, there is a big bad, a person named Dodge, who wants that key. And the first 6 books told the story of that struggle between the Locke family and Dodge. The Golden Age is something different. The Golden Age is a standalone book set at the beginning of the 20th century. And it's about an earlier age in the history of the Locke family, an age when adults could see the magic and use it as well. And it begins in the months just before Titanic is due to set sail, and ends about 10 years after World War I. And in between stacks up quite a bit of family tragedy. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking, the first story in the book, the oldest story in the book, was published in 2011 in the fall, and as a single issue, as a standalone comic book. And the final chapter of the book will be published this fall, 10 years, almost exactly a decade after that first one was published. So Gabriel, my collaborator, the artist Gabriel Rodriguez, and I have been working on this book for a decade of our lives, which is kind of amazing.
That is awesome to hear. And it also effortlessly, I must commend you, segues into the next question, which is going to be, could you talk a little bit about the collaborative process with Gabriel Rodriguez?
Yeah, Gabe is like my he's like my soul brother. We started working together in 2007 on that very first issue of Lock and Key. What happened was I brought my pitch to IDW Comics, and the editor there, Chris Ryle, showed me some different artists. They decided they wanted to go for it. Part of the reason they agreed to go for it was because I told them I could tell the whole story in 6 issues. And I was in about 6 months and 6 issues, I was only off by about 11 years and 31 issues. So pretty close. But Chris sent me some samples of different artists, and several of them could draw incredible anatomy, you know, and could really depict, you know, flying gore. But I was fascinated with the work of this Chilean artist, Gabriel Rodriguez, because his characters were so warm and lovable. They had so much emotional life in their faces. They had the glow of humor and curiosity in their eyes. And it spoke to my own feeling about horror fiction and scary fiction. You know, there is a misunderstanding that horror is about throwing a bunch of viscera at the reader, and somehow that's scary. It implies that horror is about sadism, and I don't think that's true. Maybe that's the, you know, impetus behind bad horror fiction, but I think good horror fiction is about empathy and compassion. It's about giving you some characters to love, you know, and you fall for them and you care about them, and then you see them backed into a corner and forced to deal with the worst that life can dish out at us. And you're there with them in the darkness, and you're rooting for them, you know, you're rooting for them to get through it. And you know, and this is how horror serves us as readers, because you may never face a vampire, you know, or you know, a psychopath with a mask made out of human skin and a chainsaw in one hand. But most of us do have some dark hours of the soul, you know, when a loved one is really sick, or you've received a bad diagnosis yourself, or you wake up one day and find out Donald Trump was elected president. These are scary things to happen in a human life, you know, and horror fiction does help you think about, how am I going to deal with this? What kind of person do I want to be in these moments? You know, how will I adapt to the fear I'm feeling now? You know, and I think that that's a positive, you know, that's suggests that horror fiction is actually useful to us. And as a guy who's written a lot of it, actually, I would love that idea.
Well, that's awesome. And you know, I definitely got to agree with you on that one about the relevancy of horror and the importance of it. If I could, I also want to just circle back for a second, because I sort of got a little off topic, which is that we wound up hiring Gabriel Rodriguez to do the comic. It turned out that he's just packed with extraordinary ideas and a tremendous ability to show nuance in the emotional lives of our characters. I've learned we are full collaborators. It's not my story and he draws it. It's our story and we figured it out together. I've learned as much about the characters in these books from the way Gabe draws them as he's ever learned from anything I've written about him in scripts. And I just can't imagine a better, more fulfilling collaboration. And I would also include Chris Ryle, who edits them, and Jay Photos, who's colored them. You know, writing is a lonely business. It's very isolating. You spend a lot of time listening to the voices in your head. Working on the comic is the closest I'll ever get to knowing what it must be like to be in a rock band for a living, you know, and to be able to feed off the energy and creativity and excitement, you know, of the guys on stage with you. So I got lucky the day we signed Gabe to do the comic. Delightful. My next question is the Golden Age. As you've said, the Golden Age provides a glimpse into the lives of the Locks pre the initial 6 installments. And I'm just wondering, for the newcomers, would you be able to share a little bit about this extraordinary family?
So the Locke family has had possession of Key House in Lovecraft, Massachusetts since before the Revolutionary War. And deep beneath the house is a cave, the Drowning Cave. And in that cave, there's a thin spot between our world and another world, a cruel, barbaric world filled with something, malevolent spirits that, for lack of a better word, we can call demons. The demons are very much drawn to our world, but they can only survive in our world by possessing a human body. They have to leap from pretty quickly from their world into, some hapless human being standing on the other side of this barrier. If they don't, they fly at our world like a moth drawn to flame, and upon entering our world, they're transmuted into this reality bending metal, the Whispering Iron. And all the keys in Key House have been forged from this iron, which can pick the locks of reality itself. And so the Locke family has had the responsibility of looking after these keys for centuries now. And in the Golden Age, we meet Chamberlain Locke and his brood. Chamberlain is an enlightened and optimistic early 20th century figure. There's something a little Bradbury-esque about his creativity and his hopefulness. He believes that the 20th century will be an era of big ideas, big dreams. Clearly, man is reaching a stage when he will put war aside forever, and learn to live peacefully in harmony with one another. Of course, it turns out Chamberlain actually has a pretty bad call on what the 20th century is going to be like. He has a son who is too young to fight, who absconds with some of the keys to fight in World War I, where some of the horrors of the keys are capable of unlocking some really horrific possibilities, but they have almost nothing on the use of chlorine gas in the battlefields of Ypres, and so there is a visit abroad to the worst hours and days of World War I, and then there's this other part of the book, which is the crazy final 2 chapters of the book, which almost requires that's almost like a separate conversation. Gabriel and I were very inspired by the work of Neil Gaiman and his groundbreaking fantasy comic book series, Sandman, Sandman is really the Sergeant Pepper of the comic book world. It is the Lord of the Rings of comic books. And Gabe and I sort of figured out how to tell the story in Lock and Key from our reading of Sandman. Neil Gaiman and his many, brilliant collaborators taught us what was possible. And we had an idea years ago that it would be amusing to send the Locke family to the hell that is glimpsed in the pages of Sandman. And I even had a reason for it. There is, in the Sandman comics, there is a key that opens the gates of hell, a massive key that Lucifer carries with him everywhere. And if you have that key, you have all the rights of a sovereign in hell. And I thought, what if that key is made out of whispering iron, like all the other keys in Lock and Key? And when I posed the idea to Neil Gaiman, he said, why not? And so hopefully the Golden Age builds and builds through a series of increasingly fraught episodes in the early part of the 20th century. But ultimately, it takes one of our heroes, our heroine, Mary Locke, into the world of Sandman. It's our first time we've ever done that. That ultimately, that huge geek, thrill, the comic book crossover. So we, you know, Gabe and I have always wanted to do all the weird stuff that comics makes possible. You know, we did a comic that was like, you know, in the form of gag strips like Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes. We did a comic that was all full page illustrations. If it looked fun, we've always wanted to do it. And there's this long tradition of, you know, dorky comic book crossovers, and we wanted to do one. Neil said yes, and so we wound up taking, you know, mashing the world of Lock and Key up with the world of Sandman, and it turns out the two go together pretty naturally. It's like chocolate and peanut butter.
Well, I'm allergic to peanut butter, but that sounds great. That still sounds.
I'm not, and you just made me hungry. That was, I have to say, we have had some, Isiah, I'll give you a chance to say a few more things to Joe, but I wanted to just jump in and say that people are loving your description of Sandman. And I just wanted to reiterate from what you were just saying, how much we appreciate how collaborative graphic novels are. They're just so fun to hear who has actually given input on a project. It's just so amazing to us. And
I'm very grateful to Neil for giving us the thumbs up and saying go for it.
yeah,
Not
I love
only
that.
but also reading scripts, you know, and giving advice. He saved us from a couple dire screw ups. There were a couple key mistakes. One, he caught one mistake where I had made a mistake about something in Sandman that was an important fix. Later, he caught a historical goof. And of course, you know, Neil is a walking encyclopedia of story and history and myth. And it was just a tremendous resource to have while we were working on the end of the Golden Age.
This is so fun. I will let you know that a lot of the librarians are saying they use the Lock and Key series, the Netflix series, as their gateway to introduce graphic novels to readers, which makes them want to read more. So from our perspective, that is the best thing we can hear. So Joe, we appreciate all you do. You do a lot of different things, and this is just such a fun project. And this
Thank you.
was really fun. Isiah, do you want to ask any other questions before we move on?
Yes, thank you. So I'd be very interested to hear how the graphic novel writing process differs from the more traditional novel writing format.
It's a lot more fun, and that's why I try not to do too much of it, because I worry that it would become too easy for me to just give up writing novels and short stories altogether and just do comic books full time. You know, I mean, it does vary a little bit. I have also done a line of graphic novels with DC called The Hill House. You know, The Hill House, and under the Hill House imprint, I did a graphic novel called Basket Full of Heads. I did another one called Plunge. And then I worked with some fabulous writers and artists on some additional books. You know, and so every project is really different. At this point, when I'm working on a comic, you know, I'm really writing a letter about it, an extended letter about it to my friends, to Gabe and to Chris. We all share a kind of unspoken language at this point. You know, we can anticipate. We know what the other person is thinking. We get their jokes. I heard a thing about the Coen brothers once making a movie. And the two of them, they filmed a shot. And Joel looked at Ethan and said, hey, do you think? And Ethan said, yeah, I got it. And I just thought, that's so funny, because nothing was said and everything was said. There is something that comes right up to the edge of, you know, telepathy that you can get when when you're in a really good, trusting, collaborative relationship. And we've had that with Lock and Key.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Isiah.
It sounds amazing, and and thank you for reminding me. I need to get to A Basket Full of Heads. That's been on my TBR pile for quite some time.
It's extremely tasteful. It's really a study. That book is really a study in good taste.
I don't doubt it.
Maybe not for, note to librarians, maybe not for your real young adult readers. Pretty R-rated business.
Well, our job is to make everyone's TBR piles longer and longer. So we're glad we did that today, even for you, Isiah. See, we got you.
One more thing I'd like to ask. This is a question that Sue asked Scott Snyder, and as soon as I heard that question, I thought I got to steal it if they'll let me. But is there anything? What titles coming out later this year are you most excited about?
Well, I'm not. I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I knew I was going to have to give an unsatisfying answer, because my comic book reading lags about 2 years behind everyone else. So I'm just getting to the Immortal Hulk, which I have heard described as being a superhero story with horror elements that has some of the same sweep and power as Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing. Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing is one of my all-time favorite long-running comics, so I'm eager to get to that. There's a Wonder Woman hardcover called Wonder Woman Dead World, and I very much want to read that. It looks beautiful. And then Scott mentioned his buddy James Tynion. James Tynion did, I'm going to blow the title, Something Killing the Children? Something's Killing the Children, or Something Scaring the Children?
Somebody just requested that. Somebody just suggested you read that in the chat as you were saying it. Yeah.
Is it Something Scaring the Children?
Something is Killing the Children.
Something's Killing the Children, and that's on the TBR pile, and is one that I'm really, really eager to read. But as you can see, my comic book reading is still stuck back in 2017. I've got some catching up to do. I'm always lagging behind.
Well, on a call with mostly librarians, there's nothing wrong with backlist, right?
That's right. And on the subject of backlist, the folks at IDW will throw rotten vegetables at me if I forget to mention that we're just releasing now the Lock and Key Compendium, which is maybe worth taking note of. The Lock and Key Compendium is definitely the biggest book I've ever published. It collects all 6 books of the Lock and Key series between 2 covers. It's like 950 pages or something. It would break your foot if you dropped it, if you dropped it on your toes. It is just absolutely massive. Hang on a second. Hang on, I'll get you a copy.
You need a visual for this. I love it.
Yeah, this thing.
Oh,
this
wow.
thing is an absolute, an absolute beast. And that's just out, and it is an opportunity to get all of it in one place, as opposed to getting all of it spread across 6. And if you have this in your bag, if you have this in your messenger bag, and someone leaps out of an alley at you, one swat, he's got a shattered cranium. So it is
so practical.
Excellent reading, but also fine for self-defense.
Well, on that note, you have just piqued a lot of interest with that book, in a lot of ways, actually. So we thank you so much for being here today with the show. You are so fun, and we could talk to you all day, but we know people have to get back to work or back to doing whatever they're doing. And Isiah, thank you for doing this interview with us. It was so fun. And like I said before, and I know you can see what I mean, the library cons are so fun. The collaborative efforts that you guys put into these books are just, it amazes everybody. It's inspiring. And certainly when we ever get back to the real world, we will definitely continue with LibraryCon live, but in person. But until then, we will keep making you guys do this because we love talking about graphic novels. It's so fun.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Oh, you really are such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And good luck with everything.
I just want to say this has easily been the high point of my week, month, etc.
Oh,
Isiah, thank you. It was a blast talking. It was great.
that was fun. Thank you. All right, I'm going to put you guys back into the
Miriam,
ether.
be well. It was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm just going to, we have a couple more things to talk about with you today. Thank you, Isiah.
Thank you.
Just a couple more things. Thank you for all of you for joining us today. I think I feel like I'm a little echoey. Sorry. I don't know why. But we wanted to just let you know to browse our virtual bookshelves. There's so much more content for you to see today. And we are not done. We have 4 or 5 pre-recorded panels for you to watch on our YouTube channel. If you go to that tiny URL on the screen, we had the most amazing young readers panel with IDW the other day, and we hope that you will check that out with Julie and Stan Sakai, Kim Grinnell, Jared Rosello, and Daniel Jose Older. That was such a fun panel. We hope you will watch that as well. We have Dark Horse creators talking about their upcoming books, Faith Erin Hicks, Paul Tubin, Roy Akubi, and so much more. We have a Sailor Moon sweepstakes that you can also enter, which is how happy could not make anybody to win a Sailor Moon sweepstakes. We have on our YouTube channel, we also have a manga panel with Kodansha, and so much more. We have Dark Horse Comics, IDW, No Brow, No Starch, all doing their mini book buzzes for you, so you can find out what's coming up from them this fall too. And Miriam, did I forget anything? I'm trying to think if we have anything else up there.
I think that, yeah, I think you got everything.
Yeah, so we thank you all for joining us today. A reminder that if you still need more information about some more fun with graphic novels, there is a book list webinar that you can register for in August. And also find your ultimate manga match at our tiny URL below. If you are not a manga fan, or if you are, this will show you what you should read first or what you should read next. And we know manga has been so popular this year, and we want you to share this quiz with your patrons and with yourselves. It's really fun. And on our blog, you'll also find some read-alikes to read. If you've liked a certain book, you can pick up a graphic novel that will partner well with it, that will complement it. And also for your patrons, you can let them know what graphic novel they would like if they like a certain book. So we've got all sorts of resources for you. Again, on our blog, we've got Pride Picks. And if you just go to penguinrandomhouselibrary.com, all of this will be there. You'll get the recording after, and that's enough for me. We thank you. What a fun day that was. What wonderful panelists we had. Sorry for the delay in the beginning, and we thank you for sticking with us, and we'll see you soon. And again, always you can contact us with any questions you might have. Take care.
Thank you, colleagues.
Bye, everybody.